country, with 1.5 million of you enrolled, of on average 92%. We're well above the civilian benchmark of 88% in the country on patient satisfaction. And it differs from clinic to clinic and place to place, but it's remarkably high. You all have responded to our efforts by showing your appreciation to your individual provider, or filling out those really irritating forms we send you every time you come. And this is a plea to you to fill them out and send them back, because that form, which is actually administered by one of the nation's leading survey companies for healthcare organizations, not just the Army, but places like Kaiser and Group Health and others, that's the same company, helps us with that form. That gives me visibility of your satisfaction with the care you're receiving, right down to the individual provider or the clerk that helped you with the appointment. Or were you badly treated when you tried to get a parking space? I mean, every aspect of care. Next slide, please. This has been our continuity, access to care and continuity campaign, looking at what capacity. I mean, one of the things we discovered at places like Fort Bragg and some others is that commanders, desperate to take care of their population of family members and soldiers that were assigned to that post, were enrolling as many people as they could. Not because they got paid more, because they don't, but simply because they wanted to get them inside the envelope of Army medicine and the electronic health record that we use. But it far exceeded their capacity to provide care for that population from what we know it's going to require to take care of that population. So we have very carefully balanced now enrollments against how many people are there to take care of those patients, and then have looked for capacity downtown in the TRICARE network for the balance. When necessary, I've hired additional primary care providers. We've created capacity for what? Help me here. Ken Canistrini has helped me run that. Probably an additional 50, 75,000 patients or more. Yeah. Yeah. Continuity we've talked about, increased access. We're looking very carefully at when you all are looking to get into our clinics and what appointments are available. This is a challenge to us because we have very high access standards. Immediate access, 24/7, 365 for any emergency. Access within 7 days for a routine appointment. 30 days to get a consult into the network or back home. Or 30 days for a preventive medicine or a health promotion visit, and that's a very aggressive and very ambitious access standard, which we don't always meet, but we're working very hard because we look at every one of those kinds of appointments and try to meet them. We're looking at the end of the day, as my wife points out, listen, Eric, I don't like hanging out in your waiting rooms. What I want to know is when I see the doctor, for the kids or me or you, that at the end of the day, I'm better off for it. That's what I want, and those are outcomes of care. I want to know that a diabetic being treated in our hospitals and clinics is receiving care that meets the guidelines of the American Diabetic Association and the endocrinology societies out there, and it features very key elements of care, such as monitoring blood glucose and the eyes for blindness and the kidneys for kidney disease. Those are called outcomes of care, and they are rising within Army medicine. In fact, our health promotion guidelines for vaccinations, mammograms, all of the other preventive measures meet or exceed 90% of the plans of this kind and size throughout the country. And of course, focusing on satisfaction. I feel so strongly about these right here that we actually pay hospital commanders and clinics now increasingly not for how much work they do in terms of visits to the emergency room or operations in the operating room, but rather what does the health of the community and the individuals within it look like, and what's their satisfaction with the care. This year we will start a program to begin giving per capita incentives to my commanders on the basis of how well they do to manage the body mass index of children in the community. Because we have an epidemic of obesity, we have an epidemic of problems with healthy behaviors and diet, And my commanders have rightly pushed back on me and said, I can't be held responsible for the eating habits of children in my community. I said, well, figure it out. You know, I mean, we're going to help moms and dads and schools have healthier eating programs. It's as simple as that, because we are on the cusp of a tidal wave, a tsunami of major problems in the country because of that. And it's especially targeted at 6 to 12-year-olds who have probably the highest body mass index and the worst eating habits. And I know this. I have a 12-year-old. I know what we're not teaching them in schools these days, and I know what school lunch programs don't consist of. I know the ubiquity of sugared drinks and fast food, and we need to do something to change that. Next slide, please. Healthcare capacity, we've talked about this. One of the exciting initiatives that we have is we're leasing 17 clinics in 11 different communities across the country to put clinics out where families live. We've been watching the BRAC numbers and the Grow the Army numbers and the re-stationing numbers, and so for 5 years, we've been meeting on a regular and periodic basis to match our capacity to communities. In communities where the clinic is largely centered on the installation and far removed from where the families are, we're trying to reach out into communities, lease very high quality space, and put teams of primary care providers out there. And I think this is going to be a great venue for us to launch the patient-centered medical home, because that's going to be one of the many places that we're going to have patient-centered medical home. I think you're going to be very, very satisfied with this. Next slide, please. We've talked about the demands upon healing the soldier, the warrior of all uniforms when they return, working very hard on this comprehensive pain management. I chartered a group over a year ago to look at the problem of management of pain within Army hospitals and clinics. Pain is the most common reason a patient comes to a hospital or a doctor or seeks care in an emergency room. Pain demands enormous resources, and yet we find too many people are not adequately managed for pain, or are managed for pain only through a combination of sometimes very strong and addictive medicines. So what we've discovered is the need for us to better standardize how we give pain management from the clinic and community hospital all the way up through hub medical centers. We've partnered with the Air Force and the Navy on this, and the VA, who have been working for over 10 years to try to improve this. And we're incorporating complementary and alternative practices in pain. Because we know, and this is part of the evidence-based approach to pain management now, that processes like practices like acupuncture and movement therapy and biofeedback and meditation and yoga have been demonstrated in a multidisciplinary team to improve pain management and can reduce or even eliminate, in some cases, the needs for narcotics and others. We're working very hard on this. This is really exciting. We've got a lot of support. And frankly, the civilian community is very excited about this because they face the same problem in a big way. Next slide, please. Many of you are very familiar with the warrior transition process. There are now roughly 9,900 soldiers who are wounded, ill, or injured, and all of those combinations. The vast majority, and I would say vast majority, but about 15% of our warriors in transition, these soldiers who are in a transitional phase, either back into uniform or into civilian life as a productive citizen or on to continued care in the VA system or elsewhere, this transition, about 15% of them are combat wounded, are amputees, or gunshot wounds, some of them grievously and really need to get moved very quickly into VA or other private settings. About 40% of them are combat or deployment related illnesses or injuries. You know, you may have been involved in a rollover in the theater, or you may have developed a combat related post-traumatic stress problem when you return. And then the balance of them are the problems that we're all subject to, cancers and heart disease and serious endocrine problems, or training accidents or motor vehicle accidents that you may have been involved or they may have been involved in while they were back home on environmental leave. This has been a very good program, one that has really seized the attention of the Army up to its senior most leadership. We have a triad of care of a nurse case manager and a squad leader and a primary care manager around every one of these warriors. They're very, very difficult cases in some ways, and some of you in the audience may be very, very familiar with that and have questions about this, but I'm very much committed to this program and think it's essential, and it meets our obligation to provide for every warrior who puts on the uniform and agrees to go in harm's way in the defense of the nation, whether they're harmed in combat or out of combat, that we will not leave a fallen comrade. Next slide, please. I'll real quickly go through how we're doing this as a partnership, building resiliency campuses, either real campuses like at Fort Hood, Texas, and some of them in Europe, or virtual campuses, even using web-enabled tools, in which, go to the next slide, the comprehensive soldier fitness program that's building resiliency, next slide, our Army wellness programs in Army medicine, such as those 6 that we have in Europe and 1 in Hood and in Fort Carson that we started up about 15 years ago, next slide. And then the IMCON's role in building resiliency campuses attends to mind, body, and spirit and family and community connections. And we're doing this in concert to synergize our efforts across the Army. Next slide, please. Last thing I want to talk about is the need for us to build trust. And trust, I think, is built by a series of demonstrable behaviors intended to gain your confidence and retain your confidence in us. And we want to have trust in you as our patients and for commanders such as those that are present, our stakeholders out there. We want to do all of the behaviors that you expect of us to be able to extend your trust in us. Next slide, please. You'll see this. This is we're rolling this out here at AUSA. This is really the first and most formal presentation of this, but we are building this partnership with you. We want to be known as the Army's home for health, just as IMCON is the Army's home, and we want to inspire your trust and build a mutually supportive relationship that has you trust us and we trust you. And I think that's a good time for me to roll into the film, right? We've got a very short video here to talk about this. We are an organization now 235 years old.
We've had at every conflict or every battle that has fought to preserve our freedoms, we've had Army medicine there.
And our warrior ethos talks about mission first, never accepting defeat, never quitting, and most importantly to our medics, to never leave a fallen comrade.
That's the contract we make with the American soldier and his or her family.
We talk about the privilege to serve for those that are entrusted to our care. So trust is embedded in our basic mission.
That at the center of what we do is preserve life, to relieve suffering, to optimize function, and at all times to promote the growth of the people we care for.
The premise that we work on is that there is a culture there of trust, and therefore I'm automatically going to make the assumption that you have my best interest in heart and I have your best interest.
That's the kind of relationship with our patients that we never want to lose.
Keeping your promises is, it's about a commitment you've made. And if you do what you say you're going to do, then your people trust you.
And everything you do needs to be related to how you build and communicate that trust. That if you can't do that, that all of the technical expertise and all of your hard work and all of your late nights will be for naught.
And if you don't have trust, then you cannot ever have a positive relationship, because trust is the basis, I believe, of every positive relationship.
You never move away from your core values. You never move away from the foundation which trust is based upon.
This notion of cultivating trust, it's something that's measurable and tangible. It's reflected in discrete behaviors.
And it starts by us leaders modeling the behaviors that we want our people to display.
And we're trying to cultivate what those behaviors are, what the dialogue is, how one measures it. And to do that, we have to be able to do it in a somewhat standard way from one end of Army medicine to the other, from when the sun comes up to where the sun goes down.
I think what we've learned over probably the last 9 years is the importance of transparency, the importance of looking critically at what we do to see where we can improve.
We have to be open to listening to our people. We have to make sure that we have those periodic dialogues with them, between staff and supervisor, etc. And that extends all the way to our patients. Positive feedback lets us know that we're moving in the right direction, we're doing the right kinds of things. The negative feedback lets us know where we need to redirect.
We want to ensure that our patients understand that we have the best for them at the forefront of our decisions. And so they need to trust us that we have their best interest, and we need to trust each other that we're working collaboratively as a team to achieve that.
It's that trust that we want to keep coming back to and cultivating, because it's at the cornerstone. It's really more than that, it's the glue that holds the whole organization together.
Our whole mission is about taking care of America's sons and daughters.
I believe our nation trusts us to provide the very best health care for those that are wearing the cloth of our nation.
The American fighting man and woman will take enormous risks, will kick down a door in the worst neighborhood in the world, because they're armed with the knowledge that over their shoulder is a medic who, if they're harmed in the course of defending the country, will be there to save their life, to ensure that they're brought back to their families, will have the greatest opportunity to return to uniform, and if not, to return to life as a productive citizen. Well, thanks very much. I'm told in the future iteration I'll be played by Brad Pitt. But I think we're going to keep my Sergeant Major and Patty Horoho. They're both very... So thank you very much. Thanks for the privilege of leading this great Army medical team, and for the privilege of serving all of you as our patients and our soldiers. And I look forward to your questions and opportunities to improve and maintain the trust that we have in you, and hopefully you have in us. Thank you.
We're going to take questions first from this room, and then we have an overflow room on the other side of this wall, and we'll take a question from over there, and we'll see how long that takes. Are my mic holders around? Mic holders? Okay, let's open it up for questions. I have a question right down here.
All right, sir, thank you for your presentation. I've seen a lot of things improve in medical services. I'm a retired Sergeant Major, so I've been around the Army for a number of years. But I'm here today as an Army spouse. My husband is Command Sergeant Major of the 9th Mission Support Command, which is a reserve component that covers all of the Pacific. Guess part of my question is, what are we doing to take care of the 206,000 Army Reserve soldiers that are continually being deployed and redeployed, and they're coming back, they're being put in WTUs when necessary, and for example, we may put them in Tripler, but their family is sitting over in American Samoa, so they don't have that part of support to help take care of them. And how do we keep our reservists healthy when we're continually deploying them if we really don't have medical support for them? The Reserve Select isn't quite getting to some of our soldiers in American Samoa or Saipan.
Yes, ma'am. Great questions. I hope you heard in the back. Are the many problems that we're facing in attending to both the sustainment of health and improvement of health of the reserve component, Army National Guard and reserves, and and the care that they require or may require, especially after they return from deployment or they've been brought back as a wounded or injured soldier. You've heard the chief talk about, ma'am, and thank you for your own service, and I appreciate it, and for the support of your husband. You've heard the chief talk about the fact, and the chief of the Army Reserves, who is my neighbor, but I rarely see him because the Stoltzes are always on the road, trying to tackle these problems and find out at the ground level what's going on. You've heard the chief talk about, and General Stoltz talk about the fact that we've moved from a strategic reserve to an operational reserve, meaning, for those of you who don't get into the jargon, that once our large Army Reserve and Guard, and General Ray Carpenter's responsibility, was intended to be used for maybe a single or a very few nation-threatening wars or conflicts in which we, the active component, I mean, go back to those times of air-land battle in Central Europe. We, the active component, were going to be the speed bumps for the Soviet Union coming through the Fulda Gap, and they slimed and nuked us. And meanwhile, back here in the continental United States, the reserves were going to stand up. We're going to have time to prepare, to get trained, ready, equipped, their health status established, their dental problems fixed, and then they would deploy as a strategic reserve. But now they're in an operational tempo. And so the design of health care for the reserves was never confronted as it was for the active component. Most of our reserves don't live near an installation. The TRICARE program, when it was first established, was seen as an overflow. As we began to draw down the active component medical system at the end of the Cold War and the first Gulf War, TRICARE stood up as an overflow, if you will, as a safety valve, especially around large installations, Army, Navy, Air Force, to allow us to tap into a civilian network to complement and supplement our diminishing or even smaller, but as the population of beneficiaries grew, because now the population of beneficiaries outstrips the number in active uniform of retirees and family members out there. That was centered around large installations. Well, the reserves and the National Guard come from what we call the white space. It comes from the heartland. It comes from places like American Samoa that doesn't have a robust TRICARE network. And the reserves themselves do not have, unlike the active component, a robust, organic medical care system. I mean, General Fred Franks, General retired Fred Franks, who's just conducted an evaluation, a study for the Chief of Staff of the Army on medical care for the reserves, came back and said, you know, in the whole Florida Guard, there's like 6 doctors. And I said, right, because the Guard was not designed to have a robust medical footprint. It only has brigade surgeons and battalion surgeons and some medevac companies for the fight. They were reliant upon health care as a reservist or National Guardsman in the community. And so we're working hard to try to reverse that. But I will tell you, this is a daunting challenge to us. Now, we have tried to solve the problem of that wounded or injured soldier from the reserve component who comes back and is eligible to go into a warrior transition unit, but whose family is back in Des Moines. We've created a series of what we call community-based warrior transition units that are managed centrally, but are allowing soldiers to go back and live in their homes, to be cared for by a network of care back in their homes. We have them in 9 different locations around the country, and we're working hard to allow us to do that. But that's challenging to us, because we find that when we try to centrally manage care that's given at home, it really delays the amount of, it extends the amount of time required, but it's still, in many cases, far better for the family and the soldier. Doesn't help us in American Samoa. Didn't help us with the 41st Oregon National Guard, who came back through Joint Base Lewis McChord, was demobilized. Certain medical problems were found, some behavioral health problems, and then they were sent back home, demobilized and sent back to home. Well, they were sent back to home with with essentially an IOU for care in the TRICARE or the VA system because they are eligible for care there, but we don't have robust networks in Eastern Oregon. So we ran into real problems delivering on that care. We're working very hard to solve that problem, but I don't have an instantaneous solution. Did I get anywhere close to right there, General Gallagher? You have responsibility for the Pacific.
It's also a funding problem, if you will. Because the status of the reserve component and the National Guard when it expires 6 months after they redeploy, and unless they got a medical problem or retained on active duty, then they have to be brought back on active duty.
What General Gallagher was saying is that the eligibility for care in the direct care system as an active soldier ends very soon after they demobilize and redeployed and demobilized. We're working very hard on solutions to all those problems, to include ways that we can keep active component, or excuse me, reserve component soldiers in when they require it through through an order that extends them on active duty and the like. But I will tell you, it's going to be some time before we solve the problem of where we deliver care in these very remote places. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, sir. We're going to take a question from the other room. Is that room ready to take a question or ask a question?
Yes. My name's Jennifer Orr, and I'm from Fort Hood, Texas, First Cav. I was asking about the health issues that you were talking about as far as families, their eating habits, and some of those issues. I love to cook. It's a passion of mine, and it really concerns me, the issues that we're having in the United States as far as families not understanding. I mean, I think it comes mostly from, people that are just did not learn the skills from their own families about how to shop healthy, how to eat healthy. And I was wondering if you guys have, thought about getting classes. We do the Army Family Team Building. I know we have a facility on base that has an open kitchen. I would volunteer to teach cooking classes, very basic stuff, so families could come. We could give them a shopping list. See, these are basic vegetables. These are basic things. People don't understand that they can shop healthy. They think it's too expensive, or they're embarrassed that they don't have very good cooking skills, so they don't want to ask for help. And, it really hurts my feelings when I see kids struggling with their weight and they feel left out. It leads to emotional issues, health issues, all those things. And some people they were never taught, and they're embarrassed about it. And I would love to maybe see if you guys are working on any programs that we can incorporate that with financial planning, and teach people how to shop, teach people how to cook, and be healthier. I feel like there's really easy solutions without a ton of funding, and I wanted to know if you were, going to do any new curriculums or try to incorporate that. They don't teach that in high schools. They don't teach any of that. So that's about it.
Thank you for your question.
No, I think those are great points, and I appreciate your willingness to help. I think you're beginning to get at the problems of how we modify the behaviors of people, to include myself. I admit it. I love French fries. I love hamburgers. I've been not allowed to eat a fast food hamburger in 3 years, 27 days, and 4 hours by a very health-conscious wife. Anyone who hasn't seen the movie Super Size Me, go home and rent that movie. Bring your kids together, your grandkids together, whoever. Sit down and watch that movie. It'll change your attitude toward this problem, and you'll begin to see what some of our problem with the epidemic of weight in the country is about. But you're absolutely right, ma'am. A lot of this revolves around people really not having solutions to that. We're looking, our Public Health Command, under the command of Brigadier General Tim Adams and his public health people, are working very hard on a program to try to change the behaviors that lead to weight problems. Some of the real progressive places, I know Paul Kortz, the commander down at the Wynn Army Community Hospital in Fort Stewart, Georgia, is a zealot, and I think we all have to be zealots. It doesn't look like I'm a zealot from my body habitus, but I really am. We have to be zealots about this. Paul has gone to some of the award-winning chefs, for example, the chef that went into the schools in one of the heaviest schools in West Virginia. He brought that chef down to Fort Stewart to teach the schools and the community about healthier cooking. And I'm looking for those kinds of ideas. And so partnering with great family members like yourself, ma'am, are going to help us. But at the end of the day, as with many things like use of alcohol and cigarettes and exercise, these things are about changing our behaviors, behavioral modification, and getting at the basis for why those behaviors aren't being changed. And we'd like very much to partner with the Army family and our IMCON partners and others to make that happen. Thank you for your question.
Please join me in thanking General Schoonmaker for sharing his message with us this morning.
Thank you.
Our next presentation will be by Major General Douglas L. Carver, Chief of the Chaplains for the United States Army, and Dr. Scott Stanley from the University of Denver. General Carver and Dr. Stanley will provide an overview of one of the largest couples marriage education studies conducted. This overview will highlight the services provided to Army couples and the results from the ongoing study, including data on the effects of combat exposure and PTSD on Army soldiers and their spouses. Please hold all questions for General Carver and Dr. Stanley until we have completed our panel. General Carver, please give a warm welcome to General Carver.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And also in the next room, good morning. Okay, I think they're there. Let me begin, first of all, by thanking all of you who are in the room for all that you do on behalf of our great soldiers and families. The last 10 years, as you've obviously heard, the last several days has been tough on our Army communities, our Army families. It's been tough on you. General Corelli, I'm sure you've heard his great comment, our Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, as he refers to Army families. He said the unsung heroes of the last 10 years of war have been our spouses, those who have kept the home fires burning, those who have predominantly been single parents while our loved ones have gone back and forth downrange to do our nation's business. Oh. Let me also say thanks to the caregivers. Our Chaplain Corps, which represents almost 3,000 chaplains and about the same complement of chaplain assistants in all three components, our active forces, our Army Reserve, and our National Guard. We're in the caregiving business, just like General Schoonmaker and the Medical Command as well. In our case, as chaplains and chaplain assistants, we look at caring for the spiritual side or the soul of our soldiers. But I also want to give thanks for our social workers, our docs, our nurses, our teachers, our child caregivers, our various members of the Army Community Services, our family readiness group leaders, many of you wearing dual hats as you have a job perhaps on the outside and you're conducting all of that business as far as caring for the needs of our Army families. And a round of applause for our caregivers. We have our work cut out for us. I think the watchword of this particular conference, you've heard it on a number of occasions this week, has to do with the area of resilience. Taking care of tired, stressed out, stretched soldiers and their spouses. And I'm going to show you a short video clip that sort of puts into context for us perhaps a typical Army family that you're dealing with, and perhaps it might reflect a lot like your household.
Welcome back to our program. This week, as part of our continuing coverage of the military family, we take a closer look at relationships. Without question, the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and repeated deployments have taken an enormous toll. The multitude of emotions experienced by spouses and children can range from pure joy to utter grief. In their own words, the Rodriguez family in Wiesbaden, Germany opens up and shares their feelings on being a military family.
My name is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. I'm from 1st Armored Division. I've been back from Iraq roughly 3 months.
Little David was 3 when he left.
Now he's 5. Right? We definitely fought a battle in Iraq, but coming back over here, definitely battles and obstacles.
Now it's when we are getting back into our routine of things.
There have been times that home was a little bit scarier than where I was. When I got back from deployment, yes, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Let's go. You can't just pick up where you left off, even though you want to.
Reality set in. You're home, and now we have to get back to how it was, before deployment.
I've been gone for 15 months.
I was kind of like resentful to him for a little while.
She's had to wear, both hats, as a mother, father.
Mommy did everything.
I want to catch up, with my son so bad,
It feels good.
Seeing how much he's grown up and having to grow up a little bit more than the average kid would is definitely tough as a father.
I wanted Daddy, to come back.
When he's wondering where Dad is and if I'm all right. He didn't ask for that.
It is very touching when it comes to your children, because they're really the heroes in this.
We ask a lot of our children.
Good.
I know I don't want to throw in the towel. I know I don't want to give up. When they say people change during deployments, you have no choice.
I saw a good friend here on the front row this